Welcome. I'm George Goodwin.
And I'm Jim Neighbors.
And Jim and I are pleased tonight to be able to have an opportunity to share with you a little bit about the University of Consulting that we have just launched online within this last week.
Absolutely. We're very excited to bring content to you that we really believe will add value to your work with the federal government.
So Jim's background, I'm going to let him share real quick and share a little bit of kind of how he got started working within the federal sector, and I'll share with you my background as well.
Yes, my name's Jim Neighbors. I actually worked within the federal government for 34 years, retired back at the end of 2013, had a variety of jobs, really enjoyed working with the government, and became a consultant in 2013. About halfway through that journey of consulting, George and I, we had worked together for about a year probably, found something very interesting. And that is that many times new people working on contracts really didn't have a level of expertise that would allow them to come up to speed quickly and be able to help their companies in I'll even call it a business development or a capture kind of a manner that would really benefit them. So in other words, they were just doing their job, but it could be something actually much greater. And as we started talking about this idea with companies, they came online and said, yeah, actually, that's a really good idea, and we'd like to know more. So we've been doing this now for about a year, setting it up, year and a half as such. And we're, as George just said, we have launched last week. And so tonight, what we're bringing to you is a webinar on what you can expect on the University of Consulting.
And I am Dr. George Goodwin. I'm an internal medicine doctor by background. I did 25 years in the Army, retired as an Army colonel, and during that time had the opportunity to do many, many jobs and really finished my career working in the Pentagon and learned an immense amount about how the federal sector worked in that environment. Then, as we went through, I had an opportunity to kind of see things from a completely different perspective. When I retired, literally within my first couple of weeks of getting out of the military, Jim and I started doing some partnering together in just consulting with industry. And it was very interesting because at the time, I knew I had a lot I had to learn. Because even though I knew the government sector, I didn't know the business sector. And as we began to tie together what we knew about learning how to interact with the government, what we had seen as some of the best and some of the opportunities, then we had a chance to really say, well, you know what? How do we share those lessons learned so that whether there's individuals that want to do business with the government for the very first time, small businesses, or new employees that come on board that maybe just need to kind of get a scope of what it means, then how do we help people to learn?
Exactly. And really one of the questions that we had to come up with was, what is the value of education? At what point in time does something we have known for years actually bring value to somebody who's brand new to the subject? So a case in point. And I've said this to George many times and other folks that we work with on consulting. When you work in something for 20 to 30 years, a lot of things in your mind you take for granted. And those things that you take for granted become very, very important to others who are just trying to come up to speed very quickly. That is the value of education that we can bring. So cumulatively, on the people that we have that we're bringing to bear as subject matter experts, it's 150, almost 200 years of experience when brought together that make a lot of sense for somebody who's just jumped into the fray.
And when you look at it, when you look at some of the people that we brought on board, and we're going to go through and we're going to share with you just a few of their backgrounds. All right. Our environment, our e-learning solution allows us to be able to go through, and you'll get a chance, whether it's by taking a course and learning from some of the instructors, or whether it's through some of the live sessions that we'll have an opportunity to provide for you from some of the top experts in the different fields that have done literally decades of experience in working with the government, whether it's in the contracting realm, helping small businesses get started, working really in many different arenas. Then we'll go through and we'll share some of that with you. Okay?
So let's ask you a question right now. Wouldn't you love to understand who could bring you value, and you had the opportunity to even ask some questions from time to time? So let's take a look at some of the folks that we have that we're going to be able to bring to the table. And these are the same folks that have really created the content for you. First up, Miss Reeba Magulick. Reba's been working within the industry, especially on the capture side, for quite a while, and has been very successful in helping companies derive what their pipeline should be, and also how to go into teaming practices and how to get to a point where they really know exactly what they should be bidding for, and how to not waste their money on areas where it's just not going to take much effect as such.
And Monty Capek, I've known both when I was still on active duty. He was actually a senior executive service in the Surgeon General's office where I was working, helped me learn an immense amount of government contracting when I was running a program at that point in time. Well, through that time period, yes, he retired from the Army himself and then actually went back, worked in the senior executive service, and led the Army medical department's contracting opportunities during that time. Today, he helps an immense amount of companies figure out how to be able to understand those contracting opportunities, and he's taken his expertise and provided a number of modules, some educational opportunities for people to understand some of the depths of what does that really mean. What does the big picture of government contracting mean? How do you get into it? What are the requirements for it? And then what do you need to do if you're going to continue to move forward through that process?
And I don't know if you knew this, but Monty was actually the senior procurement official for all of Army Medical Command.
Oh, absolutely.
So he has a lot of experience not only with warrants and different levels of contracting and acquisition capability, but he has seen the good and bad of industry as well. He's also seen the good and bad of the requirements of the government. Sometimes it does really well and sometimes doesn't do very well.
And he explains. I mean, one of the
does.
coolest things that I appreciate is once you've had that experience, you can help other people understand what that means so that you get the value of that when you're moving forward.
So next is Valerie Muck. And Valerie Muck brings an immense amount of contracting acquisition experience from the point of view of running the small business office for the Air Force. Everybody who is a small, and even some of the mid-sized businesses, are very interested in set-asides. They're interested in understanding how they can go after contracts in partnerships. She understands the SBIR process, which is the Small Business Innovation and Research. She understands how what are called OTAs, other transaction authorities, and JVs, that are where you can team with other companies in joint ventures and those kinds of things. Just an immense amount of knowledge around all of those areas when you're not a big company. She knows this stuff inside and out.
One of the things I loved, even in working with Valerie as she was going through and sharing, then Valerie actually took the time just to share some of her perspective of what were some of the challenges that she saw when she was running the different programs. What were some of the mistakes that people made, but what were some of the opportunities for growth? And I think unless you've got the experience, you can talk theory. But when you've got boots on the ground experience doing things, it's a completely different perspective.
Right.
Why don't you share a little bit? I mean, I know you've known Sam for a while. You've worked on some projects. Why don't you share a little bit? Because, a lot of people don't understand the power of the legislative branch, especially when it comes to contracting.
Absolutely.
And I'll tell you, I learned an immense amount from her, even when she came on board. Why don't you share a little of Sam's background for the team?
Right. I've been working with Sam Segall on legislative processes. And while she used to be a lobbyist, and she was a very good lobbyist, she now is working in helping companies understand how to interact both ethically and effectively with those on the Hill, both on the House and Senate side. She's got years of experience in doing this. Actually has won awards in doing this as well. So she's created content not only around how the committee's processes work, but how the budgets work. How the budget goes over to the president's office, how it rolls through the various committees, how different committees have different purposes, and how those different purposes, they sometimes collide and they sometimes have to be worked out. And all of the external events of this world, how they affect that budget as well. So Sam is very, very talented in not only understanding this stuff, but in conveying it over to people who've never worked in it before.
So, I mean, with all of the backgrounds that people come in when you're looking at things, Jim and I, although we're in here and we're sharing and we're talking through the different aspects, one of the cool things I've enjoyed of the partnership that Jim Neighbors and I bring is, Jim himself with years of experience in the senior executive service, years, man, he's able to bring some of that perspective to bear, working in DOD primarily, but a lot of people don't necessarily even understand what all of that brings together.
I understand. Yeah, it's a very complex organization. And there are so many moving parts in it and so many things that are culture between the different services, in different combatant commands, and even the different research organizations where there's just great opportunities. Now, let's take an example. Let's take one example from the president's budget.
How many times have you seen people that just really, frankly, when it comes to the money side of the house, man, they don't really understand why things get held up, why maybe their contract doesn't move forward, why the government sounds interested in something, but then it doesn't move ahead. I mean, why does this even matter
Well,
if you're going to learn?
again, what's the value of education? We're going to teach you about exactly what George just said. Within industry, you may have one person that has to make a decision, and then you get that money to flow on that transaction. Not the way it is in the federal government. And we'll talk about that. You actually can get an online module that describes to you what I call the 4 Ps. You know, there's basically 4 people that have to align on your product or service to actually get the government to buy it and use it. And that's someone with the pain, the power, someone with the power, someone with the procurement vehicle, and someone with the money, the ability to purchase it. Not always the same person. In fact, rarely is the same person. You have to go after all 4. But let's talk about the budget. Interestingly enough, the budget is an extraordinarily complex document. You may have heard of one piece of it because there's authorization acts. There's 12 of them, actually, that come together to form the president's budget every year. And there are different documents and different processes that go around in the formation of this that have to go through the congressional committees. But the most notable one is the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA. And the reason it's most notable is it's huge. I mean, it is literally billions of dollars, in the hundreds of billions of dollars that go into this. So it is the most notable. But there's 11 more. And all of the different committees have to put in money via the executive branch's desires, and those roll into those other 11 committees, and they get rolled up into the president's budget. Now, these will ebb and swell. It's very fascinating. Most people think about, well, if I'm really going to do business with the government, I need to go to DOD. Fair point, because again, its budget is huge. But did you know, under the Biden administration, at least for this year, the DOD budget is very flat. What I mean by flat, it's not going to see any real growth except for 1.7%. A lot of people believe that the weapon systems are going to remain in a sustainable mode. You're going to see some research and development, and we can find all of this information for you. In fact, we can train you on how to actually go find it yourself, which is part of the modules. But what's interesting is the other part of the government, which is going to see 16.7% growth. So if you're involved in infrastructure, healthcare, climate change, and immigration, and reform of immigration, there's opportunity. 16.7% growth. I'll give you an example. Inside of healthcare, non-DOD healthcare, there is a thing called the ARPA-H. Now, DARPA is pretty well known within the DOD, the Defense Advanced Research Program Agency. Well, under the Biden administration, HHS, Health and Human Services, is standing up something called ARPA-H, Advanced Research Projects Agency-Health. Think of it this way. $4 billion will flow into that part of HHS to develop these advanced capabilities around endemic kinds of things. I think the idea was birthed over COVID, but it's going to expand into other areas of endemic healthcare problems, whether they be cancer, whether they be high blood pressure, diabetes, and other things. It's how do we get after attacking these and actually making success happen. So a lot of money is flowing into there. Number 2, climate change. Everything that you bring to the government right now should have some sort of an understanding how it positively affects mitigating climate change. Everything. Whether it's less energy is consumed, less people are needed, smaller footprint, or maybe it actually somehow saves energy overall. I mean, the DOD is going to buy thousands of electric vehicles this year. A lot of people don't realize that. So you're going to see, again, things that are going to happen in this space that will lap over the entire federal government. That's important for you to understand. Next, in immigration reform, there's no doubt that things are going on at the border, not just the border, but lots of borders. How we reform what we're doing down there is extremely important in understanding how we can solve these problems. And last but not least is infrastructure. We have a crumbling infrastructure, everything from how we communicate to how we drive, to how we generate energy, to how we look at our banking systems, anything that's part of an infrastructure, bridges, roads, railways, everything, pipelines, is kind of old and kind of crumbling. So the budget, and you've heard about this in the news. Well, what does this mean to companies like yours? There will literally be billions upon billions of dollars in contracts that will occur this year, throughout the next couple of years, based upon what's passed even within the budget this year. This is the kind of things that we can help you understand through the modules that you will learn. It doesn't have to be a dark black hole of non-understanding. It can be something you really can take back to your company and say, hey, I think there's opportunity here in what we do. Maybe we could apply it over here. And you can become a very much of a value-added person to your company, or maybe you have the company yourself. You can benefit from this. You don't have to go it alone. It's not oriented towards some of the things you've seen before. It is truly oriented towards specific value.
So going back to where we kind of started, we started with, hey, what does University of Consulting bring? Okay, and Jim and I have talked a little bit about it, but really we've broken down the offering from University of Consulting into a few different areas. One, we have courses, and we started off with the first course we're offering is called Doing Business with the Government.
And how many lessons are in that?
There are 39 lessons in that, and we break it into 3 different modules. The first module is really a broad spectrum overview of really what is government, how does it work, and man, we have the privilege of really explaining how do you understand, what do you need to understand about the budget. Jim gave you a quick snapshot, but Sam Segall take some time to dive in and really give you a little bit more depth of understanding of the entire process that gets there and what can you influence. That's one of the things that is really cool to understand. Well, that's the first module. The second module really is more of a dive into contracting itself. What is government contracting? How does it work? What do you need to know? And finally, Jim, we wrap up with...
how do you interact with the government? How do you talk to them? How do you actually create a value where they want to talk to you? Because there's right ways and wrong ways to send emails, have conversations, and any kind of interaction with what's called a contracting officer or a budgeteer or something of that nature. We teach you how to actually think about those things.
Additionally, one of the other offerings we have is what we call our EduLive sessions. And our EduLive sessions are opportunities to hear from experts, just like Jim, then people that have done literally decades of time and expertise in the government. Maybe they're going to come in and talk about small business opportunities, maybe come in and do a deep dive into an opportunity within the DoD or opportunities within the health arena. Jim talked about some of the areas that the budget's going to flow. Well, as companies are interested in learning that, we're going to provide educational opportunities for an hour and a half to be able to come and ask anything, really get time with an expert that will help you to move forward. And so those are great opportunities in front of us.
And that can be a package deal then. Again, what we're trying to portray to you here is the value that we bring. What is the value of education? Well, the value of education is the opportunities that are before you that either are being missed or that the government just doesn't get the right solutions for. What's interesting is when you see something that actually is awarded with the government, they will also tell you how many people bid on that contract. In other words, how competitive was it? Sometimes no one else bids.
Right.
Sometimes it's just one company and they get the award because they showed up. Half a life is showing up, and in this case, maybe more than half. That's what we can help you understand as you go down this road.
We really appreciate you taking a few minutes and hearing a little bit of what we're doing to provide more value for you, whether you're just getting started in contracting, whether you're a part of a large business, but you want to be able to really deep dive into some more. But we look forward to being able to move forward and bring more educational opportunities to you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time tonight.